Can there be two world reserve currencies? Could XRP be one of them? David Schwartz answers this question. David Schwartz gets into the future of DeFi on the XRP ledger. I got some of my favorite David Schwartz clips I want to go through here, discuss it with you, and really try to open your mind to what the possibilities are for the XRP community. Let's go ahead and start here. This is a 3-minute clip. There's no video here, mostly listening. This is David Schwartz being asked a question about world reserve currency status and David Schwartz answering. Let's go.
Do you believe that there could be two existing world reserve currencies to simultaneously exist?
I do, and I think that could happen. I think it's quite realistic that a lot of the world is just done with the dollar as the reserve currency. And I think that there's a lot of places that are willing to try something else. And one of my scenarios, and I don't think it's going to play out quickly, but like one of my wild case success scenarios for a digital asset is if countries start to realize that the US dollar is not going to be the reserve currency forever. Other things are going to be the reserve currency. And the same thing that we saw with banks. Like people, when we started selling software to banks, people would say to me, why would a bank use something that like you guys were selling them when they could use something that was like made by banks? And what they didn't realize is that only like 10 banks in the country, on the planet, are Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan Chase, like the ones who would build a system that the entire planet would run on. For the rest of the banks, that's 6,000 smaller banks, those are their biggest, strongest competitors. Those are the entities they hate the most. They would not want to use the system built and maintained by them because it's going to be biased in favor of them, their biggest and strongest competitors. And I think the same thing could happen to nations.
Really quickly before we get into that, David Schwartz is saying here that the biggest banks in the world, the top biggest banks that he mentioned, they make a ton of money allowing other banks to use their rails. They are the ones that have the power, the ones in the driver's seats. They are the ones with the most to lose. That is what gets me excited here because there's the 6,000 other banks that he mentioned. There could be a little bit more than that, but those other banks are looking for solutions to basically say to the big guy that wants to charge them millions of dollars per year to use their rails. They want to say, you know what? We found something that is 80% cheaper, instantaneous settlement, has all of the compliance that we need, and is a trusted blockchain and Ripple's technology. And we can use ODL, right? There's just so much use case here for those medium-sized banks to smaller-sized banks and credit unions. The possibilities could be endless here.
Like every nation would love for their currency to be the world reserve currency. That's helped the U.S., that's grown the U.S. economy, quote-unquote, unfairly by leaps and bounds for decades. And every other country would be like, yeah, we'd like to have the world be the world's reserve currency. But the only countries that could possibly pull it off is the U.S. holding its position, maybe the EU, maybe Russia, maybe one or two others. But realistically, most countries know that if there's going to be a new world reserve currency that's a country's currency, it's not going to be them. And so they might actually prefer a currency that nobody can control to one that's controlled by their largest geopolitical rivals. And so that's like what I think is the biggest possible success scenario for digital asset. If these countries are like, okay, well, the U.S. dollar can't hold on forever, but it's not going to be our currency because no one's going to want to repeat the U.S. dollar scenario. Nobody but the EU wants the EU to replace the dollar, right? Nobody but Russia wants the ruble to replace the dollar. Nobody but China wants the yuan to replace the dollar. So maybe they could settle on a currency that nobody could control rather than one controlled by their most powerful geopolitical rival. So if you want a success scenario, that's the one that I think is the most likely.
But the main question is, how do you get everybody to agree?
Well, I mean, they might agree if the alternative is that their geopolitical rivals force some new replacement for the dollar that's not, if they just replace, the old boss with a new boss. If the choice is no boss, if that happens to make a bunch of cryptocurrency people rich, I don't think they're going to see that as too much of a minus.
When you look out at the globe right now, the US dollar is falling out of favor around the world. Trade wars, inflation, these types of things have caused other countries to look for other trading partners. The US dollar won't remain supreme too much longer. So what do you go to after? Russia's economy is in absolute free fall. Their interest rate is an average of 25 to 30%. Bankruptcies are piling up. You don't want to be holding rubles right now. Yuan, they are printing trillions of dollars just to stabilize because they just had a complete collapse of their real estate market, and as well as factories are closing and people can't even get a job. So you don't want to go to the yuan. Now, the euro might be the strongest possibility here, but there are other countries that don't want to use the euro. So could you use something digital? Could you use something that doesn't give anybody, any country, any government a leg up? That is where something like XRP could really come into. And I think that's what David was trying to hit home there. That's one of my favorite clips to listen to. The vision of never selling our XRP lending protocol. This is something that we should be talking about more and more. Lending and borrowing, this whole DeFi layer that's being built out in the XRP ledger right now. The EVM sidechain has really opened all of these doors and new capabilities, and we are walking through them in real time. Let me play this.
Funding all happens on Ledger. So that means that if you're interested in funding a loan, you could pay into one of these lending pools, and as payments are made on the loan, you could receive money automatically from the Ledger as those payments are made. And you could also use the loans as collateral. You could use your share of the payments as a form of payment. So it'd be very liquid for the holders of these loan pools. Funding all happens on.
Okay, let me just show you one more thing here. Here is the XRP Ledger Protocol XLS66 explained by Vet. One step closer to full DeFi features with lending and borrowing.
Yesterday, there was the proposal release of XLS 66, 65, and 64, if I'm not mistaken. And they all play together the role of basically allowing with 66 the lending protocol on XRP Ledger, lending and borrowing natively. It's a gigantic proposal, right? It's just a proposal right now. Again, there's no code. It's just a proposal open to discussion to the community, us. What we want to do also here to talk about exactly that, lending and borrowing on the XRP Ledger.
Overarching term is a money market. This is something you will read and listen everywhere. It's not really lending and borrowing. Lending and borrowing is just this part, like short-term debt investments. And what you will do as a lender, like we as a retailer, it's also about institutional and wholesale investors, but I talk like for retail. What we will do is we will lend or deposit our funds into so-called pools. On Ethereum, they are called vaults, and somewhere else it's called funds. It's basically always the same. It's like a pot where money sits, and a borrower, someone who needs funds because maybe he don't want to sell his assets, he wants to borrow assets, he will take a loan. And he's willing to pay some kind of interest for borrowing, and the interest is managed by someone who is the delegator, the pool delegator. We will talk about them later because that's super interesting and different to the Ethereum side. And there's also one part that is about collateral. So how do you protect yourself as a lender against the default of the debt? In the sense, meaning that someone is not willing or maybe isn't able to pay back the assets that he borrowed. So if this happens, it could be that the lender isn't really getting back his money. And to counter this, there is a safety mechanism. Most of the time, like in Ethereum, you have the over-collateralized assets. Like you have to supply assets first before you can borrow something. It's a little bit different. The details are different. I don't know if it's better or worse because I'm not like deep into the financial parts, but it's definitely different. And what you will see as a lender is some kind of APY. That's the interest that you will gain from the borrower. All
right, I did want to show you this here too. XLS 66 protocol proposed for the XRP Ledger is set to fundamentally transform platforms' DeFi capabilities. Here's why it's seen as a major breakthrough by the XRP community and influential developers such as Vet and CryptoRito, basically the two people we were just listening to. Unlocks borrowing and lending markets. XLS 66 introduces a fully on-chain decentralized lending and borrowing protocol directly on the XRP Ledger, similar to what makes Ethereum DeFi protocols like Aave and Compound so popular. No intermediaries. XRP users can lend and borrow assets without a third-party involvement, boosting efficiency, transparency, and accessibility for a global user base, basically leveling the playing field. There's not somebody there on the other end like a banker saying, oh, your credit's not high enough, you don't have enough assets, we can't help you. Right? This is all based on what you actually have and what you can borrow. Supports multiple assets. Users can able to deposit and earn interest not only on XRP, but other tokens like Wrapped Bitcoin, Wrapped Ethereum, increasing the attractiveness of the protocol for both retail and institutional players. Foundation of full DeFi features expands DeFi use cases. Lending and borrowing are central features for mature DeFi ecosystems. With XLS 66, XRP is one step closer to fully DeFi features, positioning it as a competitive choice for both retail and institutional users seeking lending, stablecoin, and real-world assets supported on-chain. I did want to show you this clip for David Schwartz talking about the future of DeFi. Trillions are coming into XRP's market cap, says Rocco XRP from this clip. Let me play it.
I feel like we really are on the cusp of a mass institutional adoption, both of DeFi and of other blockchain technologies. I think this is also like one of the key obstacles to mass retail adoption. A lot of people in the space previously thought that retail adoption was like the big wave, but I think institutional adoption is a precursor. You have to connect to where people are. You have to go to where the value is. You can't build a new financial system from zero, ignoring the existing financial system where everybody's money is, where all the value is, where the real world is, trillions of dollars in value. You can't just say, forget about all that. Let's just build something new over here. It doesn't work. And so I think this wave of institutional adoption over the next year or two is going to be what's going to pave the way for mass retail adoption. And then we can deliver on those promises. Like, we all want to bank the unbanked, but the unbanked, they have to be able to spend their money to buy groceries and pay their phone bill. And so we have to have that institutional connectivity. And I don't think there are any obstacles. I think and I think this conference shows that.
All right. A few other things here I wanted to show you and talk about. Mass enterprise adoption. I think that's where we are now. David Schwartz.
Thanks. Both myself and Ripple have been in this business for well more than 10 years now. We watched the very early stuff going, to what's happening now with institutional adoption. In the very beginning, it was very experimental, and it was almost like Las Vegas. It was gambling. It was very sexy though. Like, you attract a lot of people to fancy casinos, but it doesn't have a whole lot of real world utility. It's not financial system 2.0. Financial system 2.0, a lot of it is frankly boring. Like, for most people, what they need is a savings account is an extremely useful thing. It doesn't produce high yield. It isn't very volatile, but it's extremely useful and practical. And so we've watched that evolution to more useful, more practical, more enterprise focused, more compliant. Compliance was a bad word in the early days. Everything was just completely decentralized. But the problem is the value is in the real world. If we're going to build Wall Street 2.0, we can't just say forget about everything that we have. It's trillions of dollars worth of real world value. So what you're seeing today is you're seeing stable coins, which are, they're igniting DeFi ecosystems. They're very institutional products, but they're also, anybody can hold them and transact them. They're compliant, but they're also, free flowing. You're starting to see DeFi applications that look more like TradFi. They're not about getting huge amounts of yield at very high risk, but they're about things that make a lot of sense to people, like treasuries. I think the obstacle for mass adoption within a few years of that cusp is we need the institutional adoption first. The same thing happened with the internet. You have to build bridges to where the value is, to where the people are. There has to be usability. We have to solve all of those problems to be able to turn that corner to mass retail adoption. So I think the precursor to that is going to be mass enterprise adoption, and I think that's right where we are now.
So listen, you have this legacy system that's decades old, all right? And you have all of these banks that are connected to the legacy system, and some of their software and technology is all different, right? Not everyone's using the exact same software. This is part of the reason we moved to ISO 20022, so everyone could be on the same standard. But the software is a different story altogether. And so you have to build bridges in between those legacy systems and all of that different software. If you look at FIS or Finastra or Temenos, all of these are different software providers for banks, right? Technology that banks can use to move money. And so how do you connect all of that? How do you interoperate? How do you make it all interoperable? That is what we're trying to solve here. And once you solve that at scale, well, now you've made the next financial system, and Wall Street 2.0 is knocking at the door. David Schwartz also tweeted this out. Thank you for Anders X. As many of you know, the XRP ledger is public and permissionless at its core with optional permission features for regulated use cases. The open foundation makes it adaptable, interoperable, and well-positioned to serve as the critical infrastructure for the world's financial system. Now, let me ask you this question. What blockchain right now is trusted by the entire world? What blockchain has gone through regulatory oversight and scrutiny for over 4 years in the United States, which is the biggest financial market in the world? If the US had to wake up tomorrow, right? If Trump had to wake up tomorrow and make a call that the old system has to go, what is the new system? What do you think he's got to choose from? Has to be an American technology. It can't be something from Switzerland like Ethereum. Has to solve issues at scale. Compliance has to be built into it. Institutions have to trust it. Countries and governments around the world have to trust it. What is it going to be? What options do we have? You could say maybe R3. You could say HBAR, right? HBAR might be a solid choice, but liquidity might be a problem there, right? It's a whole lot smaller ecosystem than the XRP ledger at this point. So there's not many things that you could go to say, hey. Now, Chainlink is solving some of this interoperability between legacy systems and the new financial system. But that is not a settlement layer. That is a connector of things. That's why Swift is looking at Chainlink to help connect it and be able to send these messages and include this new infrastructure for payments. But you still need something to help with. And when you look at other incredibly smart people building in the space, they often will talk about David Schwartz like this.
Dave Schwartz is a great guy. He's a brilliant guy. It's a lot of fun being in meetings with him and love to hang out with him. He's super smart and he's just really passionate. After all this time, he still has it. But remember, every step of the way, they were excluded, delisted, sued, and even when they won, they still had to fight. Yet they're still around. They're still here. They're still resilient. And they got a bright future because of it. And Cardano in many ways has similar respects, as does Bitcoin.
David Schwartz is one of the smartest people in the crypto space, building solutions with other incredibly bright people. The question is, who do you think's smarter? Charles Hodgkinson or David Schwartz? I think that would be cool to have like IQ test, but then it would be a little, I don't know. My brain is wandering. It's been a long day. This is the 6th video I've recorded, so we're at the tail end of that. Anyways, this is the new system. How long will it take the new system to be fully adopted, to be fully used, to level the playing field globally, for everybody to start using blockchain? I think this is still yet to be seen, but it's starting to fall in place, right? Things that we talked about 3 or 4 years ago are finally starting to happen. It's an exciting time. If you're just now showing up to the crypto space, or if you've been here for years, your timing couldn't have been better, right? Keep learning, keep growing. You will make a difference in your life here over the next few years. It's going to be extremely exciting. If I can do anything to help you, I'll be here. Take care. Have a good day. Bye. Nothing in this video should be taken as financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. Please seek financial advice if you need it. Let's get back to the video.